Dear friends, to this, our first virtual church weekly service here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Vero Beach. As I am sure all of you understand, this remote service being broadcast to you from our sanctuary this morning is necessary because of the social distancing now required to contain and hopefully defeat the coronavirus, which has so disrupted human life around the globe and here in the United States. We do not, of course, know now how long we will need to conduct Sunday services in this manner, but we will provide a service each and every Sunday until this health crisis has passed and people can once again gather in our sanctuary here at 27th Avenue in Vero Beach, or out of doors on our ample grounds, should that become possible at an earlier date. Before I begin our service this morning, I want to thank Elizabeth, who is facilitating our music program this morning, and Dr. Jason Horbrocht of St. Augustine's of Canterbury Episcopal Church at the piano. And I want to thank the indispensable Matthew Bourne for his technical assistance up in the booth this morning for presenting our service. Here are just a few other simple announcements before we begin. I would remind you that meetings of 9 persons or fewer are still permitted in our lobby. We have chairs spaced out about 6 feet apart. So if you have a small gathering and want to schedule it with Kimberly in the office, please do so. You can use the lobby for safe distancing meetings. Also, if you want to have a Zoom room meeting, schedule those with Kim. Those are easy to set up, even for the technologically nervous. Speak to Kim in the office. And on that note, Kim and I are, at least at the present time, keeping regular office hours Monday to Friday. So the office is open, and you can drop in, though we're all keeping safe distance from one another. And we are available to you by phone and by email, of course. Also, I would remind you that we are having a Zoom check-in meeting every day at noon. All you do is click on the URL, which we send you in the daily blog, or if you're confused about that, call Kim. She will send it to you for sure. We also would remind you that the church's financial needs continue in this time. Pledges and contributions are still needed and appreciated, and you can, of course, send those in, or we can charge your Visa or MasterCard if you just simply let us know that that's how you wish to honor your pledge. Again, welcome, and now our worship service begins with the introit, "Come, Come, Whoever You Are." Our opening words come from an anonymous source. May the blessings of our fellowship be upon us this hour and in the days to come, that we may seek the truth more devotedly, that we may think more independently, that we will reflect more searchingly, that we will know ourselves more completely, that we may love more freely, that we may forgive more quickly, that we may pray more thoughtfully, that we may act more courageously, that we may live more nobly. Our opening song and the words are printed in your order of service. If you did print them out from the communication we got sent to you by email, the song, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." Join with us at home.
"'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free. 'Tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight.
When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. And now join with me as I light our chalice. These words from Sidney Freeman. Only a few things wear the mark of the eternal. The giving we have invested in others. The love we have expressed in deeds. The kindness we have shown. The work we have done because we loved it. The light we have shown that others may not stumble. The evil we turn into good because we saw that none of us lives apart, but we are all members, one of another. And now, as we do every week, we will engage in the ritual of stones and water. I will, as the beautiful song, Spirit of Life, is sung and played, I will slowly drop stones in the water as we do every Sunday. And you at home, please say the names, either to yourself or out loud, of those for whom you are praying or those you have on your heart, and any joy or sorrow you have. As Spirit of Life begins, let our ritual also begin.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stories set me free. Spirit of love, come to me, come to me.
Our meditation this morning, and I will share the words, and we will enjoy a period of silence, after which I will ring a bell to draw our meditation to a close. The meditation is a poem entitled Lockdown by Father Richard Hendrick, written this week about the coronavirus epidemic. Yes, there is fear. Yes, there is isolation. Yes, there is panic buying. Yes, there is sickness. Yes, there is even death. But they say that in Wuhan, after so many years of noise, you can hear the birds sing again. They say that after just a few weeks of quiet, the sky is no longer thick with fumes, but blue and gray and clear. They say that in the streets of Assisi, people are singing to each other across the empty squares, keeping their windows open so that those who are alone may hear the sounds of family around them. They say that a hotel in the west of Ireland is offering free meals and delivery to the housebound. Today, a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her number through the neighborhood so that the elders may have someone to call on. Today, churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples are preparing to welcome and shelter the homeless, the sick, the weary. All over the world, people are slowing down and reflecting. All over the world, people are looking at their neighbors in a new way. All over the world, people are working and waking up to a new reality of how big we really are, of how little control we really have, to what really matters, to love. So we pray and we remember. Yes, there is fear, but there does not have to be hate. Yes, there is isolation, but there does not have to be loneliness. Yes, there is panic buying, but there does not have to be meanness. Yes, there is sickness, but it does not have to be disease of the soul. Yes, there is even death, but there can always be a rebirth of love. Wake to the choices you make as how to live now. Today, breathe. Listen behind the factory noises of your panic. The birds are singing again. The sky is clearing. Spring is coming, and we are always encompassed by love. Open the windows of your soul. And though you may not be able to touch across the empty square, sing. So my message today is entitled Toilet Paper and Social Capital, Two Crucial Ingredients to Life. And I'm going to be exploring the all-important, the all-important idea of social capital, investing in one another. The reading before the sermon comes from a book by Robert D. Putnam entitled Bowling Alone, America's Declining Social Capital. His message is particularly poignant in this time, not only when we are keeping, quote, social distance from one another, but also at a time when, sadly and unbelievably, people are hoarding toilet paper, of all things, from one another. So here at some length are Putnam's important words about the importance of keeping social trust and communication and coordination and cooperation among us. He writes, when Alexis de Tocqueville visited the United States in the 1830s, it was the Americans' propensity for civic association that most impressed him as the key to their unprecedented ability to make democracy work. Quote, Americans of all ages, stations in life, and all types of dispositions, he observed, are forever forming associations. Recently, American social scientists have unearthed a wide range of empirical evidence that the quality of public life and performance of social institutions are indeed powerfully influenced by the norms and networks of civic engagement. Researchers in such fields as education, urban poverty, unemployment, the control of crime and drug abuse, and even health care have discovered that successful outcomes are more likely in civically engaged communities. Putnam goes on. Social scientists in several fields have recently suggested a common framework for understanding these phenomena. It is the concept of social capital. By analogy with the notions of physical capital and human capital, tools and training that enhance individual productivity, quote, social capital refers to features of social organization such as interpersonal networks, interactive norms, and social trust that facilitate coordination and cooperation for every citizen's mutual benefit. But then Putnam goes on, but by almost every measure, Americans' direct engagement in politics and government has fallen steadily and sharply over the last generation. Consider the well-known decline in turnout in national elections over the last 3 decades. We have been voting in smaller and smaller numbers. It is not just the voting booth, he goes on, that has been increasingly deserted by Americans. Since 1973, the number of Americans who report that in the past year they have, quote, attended a public meeting on town or school affairs has fallen by more than a third, from 22%, just 22%, to 13% now. Not coincidentally, he goes on, Americans have also disengaged psychologically from politics and government. The trust in our national capital has only gone down. Fewer and fewer people trust Congress and the president. And then he goes on, this broad cultural decline in civic engagement has also occurred in other areas of American life. There's been a significant drop in church attendance and religious affiliation. In union membership, it's been falling significantly for 4 decades, and participation in parent-teacher organizations. Civic and fraternal organizations such as women's clubs, the Boy Scouts, the League of Women Voters, Red Cross, Rotary, Kiwanis, and Lions, all dropping. And then Putnam arrives at his most important and famous metaphoric observation about the recent decline in American civic and social engagement. The fact that Americans are increasingly, quote, bowling alone. The most whimsical yet discomforting bit of evidence on social disengagement in contemporary America, he writes, that I have discovered is this. More Americans are bowling, B-O-W-L-I-G, than ever before. But bowling in organized leagues has plummeted in the last decade or so. Between 1980 and 2000, the total number of bowlers in America increased by 10%. But league bowling, bowling done with others, has declined by 40%. And lest this be thought as a wholly trivial example, I should note that nearly 80 million Americans went bowling at least once last year, nearly a third more than participate in national elections. And then he concludes, the rise of solo bowling threatens the livelihood of bowling lane proprietors because those who bowl alone as members of those who bowl as members of leagues consume 3 times as much beer and pizza as solo bowlers. The broad significance, however, lies in the social interaction and even the occasional civic conversations over beer and pizza that solo bowlers forego. There is a reason, he concludes, to suspect that this general decline in the health of our democratic society may be linked to a broad and continuing erosion of civic engagement and social interaction that began a quarter century ago. High on our nation's agenda should be the question of how to reverse these adverse trends in social connectedness, thus restoring among us civic engagement and civic trust. Here ends the morning reading. Toilet paper and social capital, 2 essential ingredients in life. This morning I'm going to be talking, as I've already indicated, about the all-important human and spiritual, I would suggest, idea of social capital. As I said in the introduction to this morning's reading, the idea and practice of increasing social capital has become terribly relevant over just the last few weeks as Americans have been, one, necessarily maintaining safe social distance from one another, while also foolishly hoarding toilet paper from one another as though it were gold. So, what do I mean by the phrase social capital? Well, in the reading before the sermon, which I just read, Robert Putnam talked about social capital in terms of people creating voluntary and formal associations with one another. Things like joining the PTA, sharing in the democratic process of town meetings, and bowling together in leagues. But the idea, as I understand it, is much larger and more consequential than that. About 100 years ago, early in the 20th century, author Lydia Hieffen, who was the first to coin this phrase, social capital, wrote this: social capital are those tangible assets that count for most in the daily lives of people, namely goodwill, fellowship, sympathy, and social intercourse among the individuals and families that make up a social unit. In other words, social capital is the purposeful and positive person-to-person investment members of a community agree to make with one another, especially to and with strangers, to ensure the dignity, well-being, and humanity of everyone, and thereby strengthen the social fabric and the simple human connections that hold us together as a good community. In a recent article in a Sunday New York Times entitled "The Culture of Nastiness," writer Teddy Wayne bemoans the obvious decline in both civic engagement and civility And that decline in civility, I will remind you, goes all the way to the White House right now in American life. Mr. Wayne points out that most Americans now live their lives in, quote, relative sequestration from one another, not knowing their neighbors, their classmates, and others with whom they interact on a daily basis, in ways that let them be nasty to people around them. He suggests that our relative isolation from one another, quote, leads to a vicious cycle in which the breakdown of civility and community reinforce one another. This is perfectly reflected, I think, in the hysterical hoarding of toilet paper that is now occurring across our nation. People feel no responsible connection to others, so they see nothing wrong with grabbing hundreds and hundreds of rolls of the stuff from store shelves so that no one else can have this basic necessity of life. This is cultural madness brought on by our lack of sense of belonging to one another. Let me see if I can just give you a few more everyday examples of this important asset of social capital. The first example is so simple. You get to a public building and notice out of the corner of your eye that someone is coming up behind you to also enter the building. In that moment, you face a simple human decision. Either pretend to be unaware of the people who are entering the building right behind you, or you pause just for a moment in your busy schedule and graciously hold the door open for others to enter first, even at a restaurant where you know they're going to then get to the counter before you do. Now, this may seem to many of you to be an absolutely inconsequential act that is of no real importance. But I will tell you that such simple everyday courtesies, like holding a door open for someone else to enter, increases everyone's social capital, not only because it is an appreciated thoughtfulness, it also powerfully reminds everyone that as members of the same community, we share social space, and it matters how we treat one another when our paths cross. Example 2 is even more common for us. After a long day of work, say, you are at your favorite grocery store along with many of your neighbors, all trying at the same time to quickly get what you need to prepare your dinner at home. Now, the checkout lines are long, and what you want more than anything else is for the line to move quickly so you can get home and relax a bit before you prepare dinner. Now, you can see that the clerk is doing her best to get the customers in front of you through the line. But with coupons and bagging and all of it, it's taking time. And you find yourself getting irritable and impatient, not with anybody in particular, but with everything in general, with the situation. Now, in this moment, you face a social capital decision. You can fuss and fume and quietly fret within yourself, working yourself up into a frenzy of frustration and anger, mumbling to yourself that you wish all these people would simply get out of your way. Or you can decide to gently and respectfully engage those citizens around you. Now, some of the grocery stores right now are really jammed, and you're supposed to maintain some distance, but that would not prevent you during this epidemic to just turn to those who are behind you or in front of you, extend a warm greeting, say hello to the kids who are in the cart, just make eyes, and then when you get to the checkout counter, make sure you do the same for the person who's worked so hard today, taking care of everybody else. Give them just a warm hello and even ask them sincerely, how are you doing? Every time I ask a clerk that, establish eye contact and say, how's it going for you today? They look up and they really appreciate it. Just the common courtesy of letting them know you hope their day goes well. Even though you're tired in the grocery store, by making the simple choice of social engagement, you increase the social capital of everybody in the store. Example 3, you're out for a walk and you pass 4 Latino landscapers who are working in the space between the sidewalk and the street. Now, In our culture, they don't necessarily expect passerbys to stop and say, hi, how are you doing? Make a comment on the weather. But when you do that, when you just stop and thank landscapers or share with them just a moment, boy, it's a hot day, isn't it? How are you guys doing? Did you get some water today? Just by making a simple social contact, you've increased the social wealth and the social comfort of everybody involved in the situation. Regular greetings with strangers with whom you cross paths not only humanizes the moment of meeting, it also goes a long way to lubricating the gears of social interaction. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but since the epidemic, when we've all been more restricted to home, a lot of people are walking and biking. And just to stop for a moment and greet one another just makes everybody feel like we're all in this together and we're all going to get through this together. Yes, there are people around me who care for me. So when social capital gets increased, the whole society becomes better. Most of you know that over the last 15 years, I have taken 5 bicycle rides across America, 30-day month-long rides. I have said to myself each of these trips, I was going to have a spiritual practice, a social capital, spiritual practice of greeting everybody I passed, whether it was a woman in a small Illinois town pushing a baby, or a Texas farmer who's fixing a barbed wire fence, or a motorcyclist who zips by me the other direction. I would make an effort to wave or to say something to every person every day across America. It's a simple spiritual practice of greeting, and I think it increases our feeling of connectedness with everyone in the nation, just to simply say hello. Now, much to the chagrin of the riders who were going with me, I even extended this social capital greeting to cows and horses. Whenever I was passing a field and I'd see 12 cows, I would say, hello, girls, hello, girls. And you know what? Out in Oklahoma, where there's not a whole lot for a cow to do in a field, all the heads would turn toward me, and they would look at me. And for that brief moment, I'd have a little bit of interspecies social capital with the cows and the horses. You may laugh. You may think I'm a wild man, but it's true. It matters to make connections, social connections, with everybody and everything in your world, to simply acknowledge the presence of others. Social capital matters, especially right now in America, in this time of social distancing and in this time of toilet paper shortages as we combat this pernicious virus together. Even in this time of so much cultural nervousness, we human beings need to engage with one another and invest in simple courtesy with one another. It matters that we take the time and make the effort, mostly in all the little everyday ways that keep us connected to one another in awareness and respect. When you in your everyday life right now work to increase your social capital and your simple, human, caring connection with those around you, not only will you make their lives richer, you will also discover a new wealth within you, a wealth that will make you a better and more joyful person. So, as Unitarian Universalists and as caring Americans, do everything you can in this time of national stress and beyond this time of national stress, for we will get through this period, to ever strengthen our basic human connection to and concern for one another. By choosing to be rich in social capital, not only do we become better persons and make this world a better and friendlier place, we also will ensure that everybody has the toilet paper that they will need. What could be more important than that? And I say and mean to you on this day, Amen. Let us join in our closing hymn. Change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace will stride us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us. And the benediction today with which we close our service and leave you to the next week is from the ancient Greek philosopher Epictetus. You are not an isolated entity, but a unique, irreplaceable part of the cosmos. Do not forget this. You are an essential part of the puzzle of humanity. Each of us is a part of a vast, intricate, and perfectly ordered human community. But where do you fit into this web of humanity? To whom are you beholden? Look for and come to understand your connections with other people. We properly locate ourselves within the cosmic scheme by recognizing our natural relations to one another and thereby identifying our duties. Our duties naturally emerge from such fundamental relations as our families, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, our state or nation. Make it your regular habit, he concludes, to consider your roles: parent, child, neighbor, citizen, leader, and the natural duties that arise from them. Once you know who you are and to whom you are linked, you will know what to do. Go in peace, live well this day and all days to follow. Amen.